Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Douglas Planning Board meeting for October 23rd, 2018. The meeting is being recorded and is available for viewing on the Douglas Public Access channel and on the Douglas website. We'll come to order at 7:06. First item on the agenda, public hearing, ASD Wallem Mass Solar LLC. Application for a site plan review. Yep. In accordance with Town of Douglas zoning bylaws, section 9.4, site plan review, the Douglas Planning Board is holding a public hearing on the application of ASD Wallem Mass Solar LLC for a permit to install an up to 11.2 megawatt ground-mounted solar energy system on approximately 44.3 acre vacant wooded area zone as rural agricultural comprised of 21 continuous parcels. The proposed site is located at 0 Wallem Lake Road, assessors map 299, and I'm not going to read all the parcel numbers. As shown on a plan prepared for Douglas Properties LLC, owners entitled Conceptual Site Plan for ASD Wallem Mass Solar LLC by TRC Engineers Inc., 650 Suffolk Street, Lowell, Mass., stated October 2018. The public hearing is being held on Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Community Meeting Room, 29 Depot Street, Douglas, Mass. A copy of the plan may be viewed in the Community Development Department during regular business hours. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the proposed plan should appear at the time and place designated. Ernest Marks, Chairman, Douglas Planning Board. The public hearing is now open. Do we have somebody here to speak on this project? Yep. Just give your name and address, please.
Where would you like us to stand? And who's here for the site plan review for the solar array? We've got some handouts if you guys want to grab a couple of these. There you go. Got a couple more if you could pass them back, guys, if you would please. Two more.
Wind farm times 2. No, wind farm 2.0.
I'd say the stuff is full up to here.
Would you guys want me up here?
Yeah. Okay, can everybody be silent, please, so we can listen to the presentation?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. My name is Evan Turner. I am representing AMP Solar Development, which is what ASD and the title name of the project company stands for. AMP is an owner-operator of solar arrays, pretty internationally. They've got a regularly heavy focus on Canada and the United States, and with a particular focus in the United States, so say you'll find them here, Minnesota, quite often. Places that do community solar, which is a big thing Massachusetts focuses on. As the chair said, what we've got here today is a site plan review for this property here on the very south end of Wallem Lake Road before it becomes Rhode Island. So right now the parcel is undeveloped forest. Some years ago the owners had a mind to put a subdivision in. They came through the planning board, they carved up the lots, which is why it's 21 contiguous lots, and they set that up to go in the future, but it of course never got, I guess, a shovel in the ground. So some years later, once solar kept coming around, we looked at this large contiguous site, relatively flat, surrounded by wetlands here, and we thought it was a good opportunity for the tuck an array, relatively large sized array, but largely out of sight and out of mind. So what I'd like to do, guys, is I'll start right here on this northeast corner where our access is. I'm going to walk us all the way around the array, design-wise. I'll cover a couple of the features of the array, components, that sort of thing. And then I'll hand things off to Jeff Brandt, who is our engineer from TRC, to cover some of the, I guess, design features like the basins and that sort of thing for a lot of the engineering that underpins the design. Anyone have any questions before I launch into that? Fantastic. So we're coming down here south on Wallem Lake Road. We have a number of house lots here along the street, and we have what is the typical access between these two house lots here. Just to, I guess, jump to the end, we are not using that access at this point for anything. That is just the original subdivision access route. But it turns out We combined these lots with one of the larger lots up top that spans from Wallenwick Road all the way to the next. And that's a better access spot because it dodges some wetlands, gives us a larger width to work in, which lets us leave some trees along the side. And we're not driving the road right between the two houses right here.
So can I?
Yes,
You
sir.
said house
Anytime.
lots, are there houses there?
There are houses, yes,
So they're
sir.
not just house lots?
I'm
There-
sorry, yes,
There
sir,
are
they are.
homes there.
There
So
are
I just
homes
wanted
there.
to hear that.
I apologize.
Thank you.
And so we start off here with this parcel. The power lines on the street are two-phase, I believe, which means they have two of the three phases we need for the project to connect. So aside from this permit itself, there is also utility work that will take place to extend the third phase of power down Wallem Lake Road. I believe all the way from southwest Maine. It comes,
Is that where 3 phases? Is it at the intersection of Southwest?
I believe, yeah, there or just a little bit closer to the town here. But roughly that's the route coming down. But that's all utility scope, but just to let you know.
So the road, does that get torn up or is it above ground?
No.
It's all above ground. They'll add a third phase on the crossbar instead of just having the
The
two.
transformers and whatever.
Yeah, normal pole stuff. And then so we'll come out to a pole right here that is 8179, right across from our proposed access drive. Access drive will come in at a 90-degree angle from the road with appropriate apron. We'll hang a little bit of a right here, and we'll come into our site. I believe there's 75 feet to the north and south of that road, and then 25 feet or so after the clearing next to the road. I have a little bit of area here for general laydown, parking, construction trail, all the things you need. To pull things off the road and see where they've got to go into the site. And then we'll enter the site itself here from the northeast. I'll go with the big middle feature first. We've opted to put the inverters, and in this case the battery energy system, which is a relatively new thing, but we can discuss it in a moment, in sort of the south center of the array. Electrically a little more efficient to put it nearest to all of the arrays, but also the big bonus is that what little noise it does make is all the way in the middle. There's an argument to be made for putting it right at the entrance. Fire guys have quicker access, quicker for technicians, but I very much prefer to put it in the middle for all the convenience reasons, plus a little bit better electrical performance. So this array here is surrounded by a gravel road. I believe that road is 12 or 18?
It's 14, I believe.
14, so neither of what I said. 14 feet gravel, 2-inch stone. The goal being there for access around the array during construction as well as for fire access over time. Outside of that road is a fence that'll be 6 feet with a 6-inch gap at the bottom. We generally prefer black over galvanized steel. That option, so this will be just straight into the array with the underground electric here, underground electric all the way back to where we need the pole set for National Grid. So walking right back there. Off the road here, we'll have 5 poles typically for the equipment that National Grid needs. Disconnect for the array, a meter, change in voltage, and then we have a pole and then we have a shutoff. So both people have meters and shutoffs, and those all go right down in here. So you should see, say, 1 pole off the street, maybe 2 normal poles, and then 5 poles with equipment, and then we'll go underground into the array. Underground is both a little bit better to use, as well as you're not putting poles in the middle of the array because you'll shade yourself. That's a little silly. So starting here from starting in the northeast, we'll work our way. Let's go counterclockwise. We have houses and house lots right up here in the subdivision to our north. We come 75 feet off the property line, all left treed with our fence line and our road. We'll eventually hit this intermittent stream and wetland system that kind of merge together. Follow that outside the 100-foot buffer zone. We are working with the Conservation Commission now to confirm those wetland lines. So if they were judged to be a little different with the third-party review, we'd probably tweak our plans and accommodate to stay outside the 100-foot buffer is generally our approach right now. We'll come down here. This is all a gradual downhill. Hang our left here at the back, still ringed by wetlands, and we've got some retaining ponds on the downhill side to catch the water. That'll be Jeff's purview. Wrap ourselves around, another little intermittent stream, another small wetland system down here. Just set back a little bit for shading, and then right up here. And we'll get to this bottom right area, which we've left we've got a little bit of space here between this 100-foot buffer and these property lines and I believe a 50-foot setback that we've left just for equipment storage. The idea being to cut it, and if you have all these modules show up, you need a place to store some stuff. You want to tuck some equipment out of the way. Just relatively an area to put down for that. Long term, nothing there. It'll just end up being a cleared field when we're done with it. And then we can hang a left and come right back up this side. We chose to leave the limits of, I guess, the setback, if you will, treed in this case, just so there are some trees under our lease control that exist for screening purposes. You can't really beat existing trees when it comes to screening. Yeah, you can always make, people, you see arrays where they go put a fence in, they put like a tiny little Charlie Brown Christmas tree every 8 feet, and they call that screening, and in 15 years they might be right. So what we prefer to do is leave, a limit of cutting here off the property line that, fits into our lease area so the owners also don't touch it long term. We're going to lease all of this, minus a little bit of the stuff way over there in the wetland. And more or less, that's our array. Components of the array. Starting from the ground up, the racking system that the modules sit on, made of steel. It'll either be effectively nails or screws. Nails are called piles. They're just pushed into the ground. It's just a little C-beam of steel. Option 2 is a big giant screw. It's about 7 feet tall. It looks like a drywall screw. Goes in the same way. It would be a track machine with effectively it's a power drill. Just pushes down and screws, and we bolt everything to that. So those are the typical styles. For fixed tilt racking, where you all see it doesn't move and it faces south, row, row, row. What we've shown here, though, what we expect to use on this site, is called single axis tracking. Same kind of foundation, either a screw or a pile, but instead of just sitting there flat, if that's the sun over there, we do this way and we follow the sun east and west. I think these probably would track 25 degrees to 25 or so, east to west as the sun moves across the sky every day. That lets us take advantage of a little bit of this downhill slope, but also this nice big contiguous site that works better when you can get a large open space like this. The modules themselves, standard 2 meter by 1 meter rectangles, steel frames or aluminum frames, probably glass on both sides by the time we build this, silicon wafers in the middle. And the new stuff in here, so battery systems and inverter. Standard inverter, the array is DC power, which is like what your laptop runs on. The street voltage is, of course, AC power. So the first thing we have is standard all solar arrays, we have an inverter. The array produces in DC, the inverter converts the DC to AC, and then sends it on its way to the street. That also has a transformer to go from 1500 volts DC to 480 AC to 13,000 at the street. So some electrical equipment is standard. The new stuff are battery systems to catch extra power and let us oversize the array a bit, as well as provide a better quality of power. And the easiest way to think about that is a bucket. Normally, solar is just a hose. And you get air in the hose, it spurts a little bit, doesn't always come out smoothly, like the sun doesn't always shine evenly. The battery lets us take the overage, put it in a bucket, drain it out at night. So in the case most arrays will operate sunrise to sunset, this array will operate more or less sunrise to 10 or 11 p.m. And so it gets you through that evening hump when everyone goes home and turns on all their stuff. That's the highest point of consumption for the utility and the grid. That's what the goal of this program to get batteries more or less is. Let us learn how to use them well in the market and get us through the most expensive power times. Because the goal is for this Commonwealth is to use these to reduce the peak conditions that cost 80% of your bill is largely made of the most 20% expensive power hours. So those all go in the middle here. They're probably going to be boxes of lithium. You could think of these as 40-foot shipping containers. They come in just a big box. They're delivered on site, fully installed, just ready to plug in. The other option are occasionally small boxes, about the dimension of that, but maybe twice as tall, that just hold one rack of batteries. The batteries come in 19 by 22 inch rectangles, kind of like a cafeteria tray, where you put your tray in when you're done. They just slide into a roller thing, or that table just like that, 10 high or so, and then they would go in a single cabinet. The big boxes just have multiple cabinets all together. Those all come fully UL rated, fully weather enclosed, fully fire suppressed with bottles and sensoring and all that jazz. Just like the rest of the array and all the equipment in it, if anything senses a fault, it just shuts it all down, gives the technician a call. If it senses a fire, which is possible with lithium batteries, just not probable, it'll do all that, shut it down, discharge the bottles, and call the fire department. So very similar to the previous array, that it's very hands-off, but just a little more technically complex because now we have some brains and some capability instead of just the standard dumb solar that works when the sun shines. But otherwise, exactly the same product. You probably won't hear, notice it, or see it in the middle. The inverters sound about like a vacuum cleaner when they're running, because they have a fan. And they also have a smaller, high-pitched noise that is part of what's called an MPPT tracker, which you don't care about. But point being, it's got about an audible radius of about 100 feet when it's new. I don't think these things will be new forever, so that's why we put them in the middle. So even if you take a couple doublings of that power, we are the better part of 130. 800 feet or more, just eyeballing it to the nearest residential property line. In the house is, of course, a little further. To the south, into Rhode Island, no residential properties or residences immediately to our south. It, as you might be able to tell, is pretty much all wetland. Does anybody have any questions right now? That was a bit of a monologue. I believe, do I go straight to the audience? Do I go
No,
through you guys?
definitely.
Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah, we'll let you do your presentation first, and then we'll take questions from the
Super,
audience.
gotcha.
So, you got anybody on the board have any questions at this time?
A little bit, 14-foot road around it, perimeter?
I
You said?
believe so.
You believe so?
I
Don't
think that's
know.
what the plans say. I
Okay.
think so.
What page does that say? 14 feet.
And
It's a rock base.
on the access road to your battery pack, width of that,
It should be the same 14. I mean, I
Gonna
think
be
we've
14
everything.
also?
Gravel access road.
I'm gonna keep it 14 all the way around.
Stabilized construction entrance is 12 feet wide.
For the construction entrance, right?
So this diagram is incorrect, right?
So that is the original conceptual layout
Do you
for the
have-
utility,
A new conceptual layout, or,
this item. So that's, the utility requires us
that was
to-
in here, this one is in here also.
Yes, ma'am. So the utility requires us to submit a theoretical site plan at the beginning. That's what that is. That's
Okay.
just for the utility. It's not real, they don't really judge the design of it. They just want to roughly see that you can fit what you're applying for all
Okay.
those months ago.
So that's what that.
And it matches
page
the one
was.
line.
Okay.
So,
And owner says 29 Depot Street,
that
PO
would,
box.
yes, ma'am. Fred, Cliff, you guys in the back here?
On the application states that the owner's address is 29 Depot Street, which is
Well,
the
they're
town
here
hall.
very frequently, but I don't know if they could say that.
They would like to sleep here, or? So there's an incorrect filing in the paperwork, as well as on all of the plans. It says town hall.
That is incorrect. We will clean that up.
Good catch.
Because you don't have the signature of the property owner on your application for site plan review.
Gotcha.
You have Jeff Brandt
Yep.
and Jared Donald.
Roger, so AMP and our engineer. If we need to get you a signature, I'm pretty sure I can get it right now.
Well, the application needs to be updated. Yeah. That's kind of the information.
And then every single page actually has like the town hall's
Has that
information.
Depot Street number?
Yeah.
Gotcha, we will. We
So the
don't-
town is not representing this project. We just,
Yeah,
the
that
town,
is, that
or
is
the
just
town
a,
hall.
that's a transcription error with the address, descended to you
I
guys. and the
understand.
address
I
of the owners.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure on the road and the access is all the way around is okay with the fire chief.
Do we?
We did have correspondence from the fire chief. I think a copy of it's in the packet. I'm curious if they sent you a copy of this?
I don't think I have that correspondence, but that's what effectively drove us to do the road around the outside, the whole thing gravel. And I believe the 14-foot requirement was the fire chief's preference on the design.
Here, you guys can have a copy of
And if The entrance says 12, which certainly will bump that right back up if it's incongruous with the rest of it. It'll be the same.
Well, I don't see a detail for the road in the details, so,
Okay.
you know, we'll get into that when I do my review.
Yes.
Yeah, and like you said, making sure that he's happy with it.
Yeah, I don't think he's
So
seen
that,
it.
yeah. I mean, otherwise, it's straightforward, but I wanna make sure that that's covered big time.
What's the, are you putting a fence all the way around the site? It's
Right
continuous?
outside the road, it sure
outside
will
the
be
road and
continuous.
access?
The only thing, there'll be a gate down here. This will probably be outside the fence.
Are you planning on putting any plantings, or what's the offset between the fence and the residential areas?
So I believe it's 50 feet here, and I have to defer to Jeff, but 50 feet of the natural stuff. And then we're really open to planting whatever we want in the interim between. What we typically like to do is some medium to tall evergreen type plants, whether that's a shrub or say a Leland cypress, just along the edge here. That kind of gives a backstop more or less to the people's properties that buffer themselves, and then our buffer here. And I would expect to put those, here for these neighbors, maybe down here if these guys have a significant view. It gets, of course, a little bit longer. Compared, a residential property versus the residence itself is a different distance.
Yep.
And then right up here, we will plant whatever these guys want. Is the bottom line. It's a large site.
Yeah.
We've got the ability to do whatever these guys
I
need.
think if the plan could show some type of plantings on those. Also, you said that the water runoff or the way the site's tilted, or laid out, that it's actually going north to south.
No, yeah, so the whole, this is a good time to hand it over to Jeff. This is the high point of the site,
Yep.
and the low point is actually right there.
And what's the difference?
So what's the point of the one retention pond there in the upper west corner if you've got?
I'm gonna hand that off to Jeff.
It's actually more, it's
This
it's
way?
going, it's like a east to west gradient.
Yeah.
And that's why these wetlands are here, so they just fill up with water. And so we're gonna be going from a forested environment, and we're gonna remove the trees, so then it's gonna be panels with grass underneath, so there's gonna be a little bit more runoff coefficient than before. Not a lot more, because the grass is still gonna absorb, but to catch the water coming down here and to comply with the Massachusetts stormwater standards, which require no increase in runoff, we put in 2 basins here to catch things. And they have 24-inch outlets at 1% grade to slowly discharge them without a lot of flow.
Can I ask, what's the elevation change from the top corner to the lower?
725 to 621 in the middle of that basin.
100 feet.
100 feet, yes.
So 100 feet across that. Okay.
Yeah. And it's pretty consistent.
What kind of retention ponds are these? Nobody, are they just gonna
They're-
hold the water and then overflow, or are they gonna actually?
Well, they actually have the 100-year storm, which is something like 6 inches of water. There's actually a little separation in the wall down here to let the water flow through. But for the most part, it's going to just take water and let it sit there and infiltrate down. In addition, we also have an infiltration trench around the pad, just a small 2-foot wide one to capture that water coming off the pad. There's not a lot of impervious surface. There's the pad. You can call the gravel road impervious. That's what we did to be conservative, although that may absorb some water too. So for water, that's what we did. And then the whole site, when we work on it, will be surrounded with silt fence attached to hay bales, staked hay bales, which we'll put in before we do any work. And we'll put these basins in before we do any work, just so it's all set up to capture runoff.
Our preferred construction sequence there is have someone like an S&M Farms go and install silt fence and hay bale while the trees are up. And that way, when they come in to do the cutting, it's color inside the numbers. It's
Right.
kind of hard to screw that up.
Yeah.
And then that gives them the access to get to the back of the site to start the pond work before, some depending on the site, during while they stump and clear the rest of the site. So those things are in before you don't work your way down the hill, you can get to the bottom of the hill first.
Do you have the
You anticipate removing any soil from the site?
No.
We can't. The state incentive program doesn't allow us to remove soil from the site. So everything we, knock up as we do this work, the stumping stuff will get redistributed. Anything that is above what they need, very initially will get redistributed somewhere on the site.
And do you have a construction sequence on any of the plans?
We do. It's the
Which
last-
page?
Second to last, I don't know the page numbers. It's up front with all the other plans, but it's one of the second to last plan, I believe, has a long series of notes.
Okay. Can you clarify, you said redistributed stumping, what exactly that means?
C401.
So typically, I believe we stump by grinding. Generally here, they don't pull out they don't rip them out typically. So that's going to create some more wood chips and soil. So typically they spread that around. But you have to be careful on a downhill site.
Correct.
If you have too many wood chips and wood floats in whatever shape it's in,
Yeah,
those can carry themselves down the site.
Typical.
So if if you find you have too much of that with whatever, wood is left on site, we'll have them pile it rather than distribute it, so that it doesn't go all the way to the bottom, and you find your retaining ponds are full of wood chips instead of dirt.
Yeah, well, especially with a 100-foot slope.
Yeah, with the large site, it's like 28 acres inside the fence or limit of cutting. So it's about a 5-degree constant downhill. So that's why I just don't want to spread that out like mulch. You get one, good storm, and all your mulch is going to be at the bottom.
Are you guys providing emergency contact and maintenance contact information with your application?
Right now, like the O&M contracts won't have been established yet.
For the site plan review and stuff like that, just part of the filing. So there is a contact information regarding maintenance and, and if there's any emergency contact information for the site.
I'm used to that. Yeah, there would be one with the building permit, and that would be on the, typically posted right there at the fence. Some of the only, there's no signage or any of that at the driveway, excepting, that we, at the fence, we have, trespassing signs and electric signs and call us signs. And then standard Knox box and whoever needs access to it. Typically fire, but anyone else the town decides needs to see it as well.
And your separation between with fences and with the residentials is about 50-foot separation?
Yeah, that the limit of what
Yeah.
we've left is
To the north
standing
and
trees.
to the
To the south, okay.
east. Over here, it's much larger because of
Yeah,
where
that's
the
all.
lot line is.
Yeah, district line. Nope.
So, just a thought, and maybe it's, who I am, I like to keep it human. So every plan now should have the house lots, have their houses shown from now on. To keep it human, you're not on Route 16 or 146 or up on 395. There is a community around this, and I just want to see the houses in relationship to this. And I know it's on one of these plans, but I think it should be layered into every plan from now on, if it can be. Just put the houses there, that's all. Then I have a question on, what is the percentage of grass dieback that you get with the shading from the, underneath, it's not like a lush lawn you gotta play golf on underneath. There is definitely a lot of dieback on the grass, and erosion can happen. I know that the panels will be in the way of heavy rains and such like that, but is there something the engineer would know? Just think about that. And then the other thing, is there a magnetic field that comes out of this at all, being 13,000 volts or whatever, somebody said something? It's such a large array. Is that something that has any health risk whatsoever? So it's a question that I'm posing. You don't have to answer it now. Then the tracking, can you estimate the amount of glare and what the angles are relative to the houses, and if there's any at all that would have any glare from the tracking of the sun? Because it sort of is mirror-like in some ways, not always, but just something to think about, And the other thing is lithium batteries can leak, and I know you have some safeguards in that and alarms and such like that. But if it leaks into the ground and, near wetlands and such like that, I want to make sure that there's a fail-safe involved. So these are just questions I have that I think I want to have addressed through the process. So that's it, pretty much.
Okay, so off the top of my head, we'll show the house lots, get them on there in the next plan set.
Yeah.
And all the full-size stuff we certainly bring you. So the trick with a site this big on a hill is definitely stabilization over time. It's not going to take place fully in the first year, although we'll get a fair amount of grass. It will take several seasons. So a big part of what I would expect ongoing inspections of the site to be during construction, certainly when it's denuded, but also in the years after, is how well is the grass growing back? How well do you have to spot fix it? Because the array is large like that. You won't get as good a sun because we're putting the modules in the way. I would say I would expect, certainly during construction, you're talking monthly visits. when we clear down the site, we go put the ponds into the bottom. I would expect them to clear in sections and stabilize more or less immediately. That is the ideal time, and that also depends on when we clear the site. My perfect world, we probably clear this in a winter, and then we stabilize starting the spring, so we get the full growth season in. But it's just a multi-year effort to make sure you don't get runoffs and gorges.
Just put it in a narrative. I mean, that
Yes, sir.
sounds great.
Will do.
I'm not recording. Well, it's being recorded.
Health questions for the arrays, I have no information or data that and any of it points to being an issue with the size of the array.
Could you get an engineer or somebody to suggest that there would be absolutely no magnetic field that would affect anybody in the neighborhood?
I can, yeah, I'm
I
sure.
mean, I think
We can-
it's a
yeah.
nil thing, but just somebody
Yeah.
We can
should,
do that.
there
Yeah.
And
there are
it's,
smarter people than myself that could.
Yes,
probably
I'm
answer
used to
that.
transmission lines which have a much higher
So for
field
clarity,
strength compared to the
who
mills.
is qualified to do that? I would think a physicist, frankly.
it will be someone
No,
that either
we have
amp
electrical
or,
engineers at
Yeah, we go.
TRC that can answer that question.
Right, as long as they answer it and if they're comfortable, have them stamp it and just, so that the neighbors, everybody feels good and
Okay.
kumbaya and all that
So
stuff.
we're looking, just for clarity, we're looking for a report prepared by a professional engineer registered in Massachusetts that's stamped by the engineer indicating what the magnetic field is,
If any.
if any.
Right. And what effects it would have, and what the distances are, and such like that. It's pretty standard fare, because people buy houses near transmission lines,
No,
and they
it-
want to know
yeah.
what the magnetic fields are.
It's done all the time.
Right, and this is a large array. I mean, this is pretty state of the art.
yes, sir. So just relative on the voltages that would cause that, the array operates typically around 1,000 volts DC, 1 kilowatt. It will drop to 480 or 13,000 depending on how we do the electrical run to the street. But the street voltage everywhere is about 13,000 in this area. So for the most part, it operates well below that. But given the bulk of it, each panel produces about the same amount of power that 4 old-fashioned 100-volt light bulbs make. So they certainly do add up in quantity, but they're also not that intense. But that will have TRC, stamp through some of the science
Yeah.
and explain how it, what electrical field there is, how it drops away.
It's a good question.
40 million light bulbs here.
It's a lot of light
Yeah,
bulbs.
yeah.
Glare-wise, the modules are designed to not glare, like you say. There is some reflection, but they try to minimize it because we're trying to capture the sunlight. Given the ring of trees around the site and the elevation, I don't see a way that there be any significant glare to other properties.
Well, to the south, maybe to Rhode Island.
Maybe, I guess,
the panels
But I think the angle of the panels is
Mhm.
is very slight, so,
They're our neighbors.
The panels facing south, they're facing northeast, or east,
they're
west?
facing, so they run, the rows run more or less north-south with a little bit of a cant to capture some of the slope.
So
And then they will, so they're aligned north-south, but then they'll rotate from
follow
east
the axis.
and stay right under the sun
Azimuth or
all
whatever
day.
it's called.
So, I think the biggest chance of glare you would probably have would be in the afternoons when the array is, you've got the downhill to the west, so everything could tilt a little more to the west. And you've got the elevation of the site, to more or less create a 100-foot tall solar array. But thankfully, we don't have a lot of close neighbors on the west side to be immediately impacted. And then, of course, the ring of trees around the outside. I've been out there. My casual guesstimation on the height of those trees is anywhere between 60 and 100, depending on where you're looking. So
But they're deciduous. Wintertime, you may have, summer, both. And so just take a look at it,
Will do,
again,
sir.
a narrative, and somebody needs to say that it's not gonna affect neighbors and whatever else. I just think it's important, so. And then the lithium thing.
So lithium certainly, you can catch on fire. It is possible, and not. I guess I say possible. That's being a little.
Fair enough.
So what we like to do on those, we have 2 options for a second layer of containment. The containers themselves are designed to shut down fire extinguishing foam, fill the whole thing with foam, and then call someone to replace it, more or less, as well as the fire department if required. What we do on top of that, we can either put a lip on a concrete pad if this all stuff sits there, so effectively, gives it a runoff containment. Or if we don't use a pad, or if the board prefers one way or another, we can put a trench around the outside of all the electrical gear there that is lined, that effectively is a moat around the equipment.
It's just if anything leaks, you don't want it getting into the
Certainly
ground.
not.
And so I think a pad with some sort of edging or something, in my mind,
Yep.
but I don't know about the rest of the people in the
Yeah.
pit, but it just
Much better
captured
than the
bulletproof, you know, we're near wetlands, we're near a lake, we're near, you know, it's just so sensitive, so.
Yes, sir.
yeah.
One more. So there's a few planes that land in Wallem as well as the reservoir and stuff like that. So the only concern regarding the glare, because the lake is west of there,
Yep.
I think that's the only concern I would have. You know, I've seen them from above with helicopter rides and stuff like that. They're mainly blue, but I think, you know, the concern is just any glares and what time of the day would those be.
Gotcha. So I do have some experience there, just small world syndrome. I spent 5.5 years in the Navy as a pilot, flying low altitude reconnaissance planes.
Thank you.
So there is some, I guess, anecdotal expertise. The lake is way worse than the solar panels. The lake water is the worst for that. The FAA actually did this on another site where I'm building within about 800 feet of a private airstrip. I can have them go do a hazard assessment, but it takes 45 to 60 days to come back, and I can, with 99.9% certainty, say there will be no hazard to aviation. But importantly, they don't, even a private airfield, Massachusetts doesn't govern them at all. And then of course they're gonna have a hard question when I, would just point at the lake as a runway. That will be a hard thing.
Well, that's probably a good answer, but put it in writing and be done with it.
Yes, sir.
That's
That's
what
what
I
I
think.
think.
Yeah.
So it's a discussion topic.
Okay, anybody else on the board?
Just one. How many of these sites have you guys done?
In Massachusetts.
No, just throughout.
I guess I'll layer it out. I personally have had my hands on about 3 dozen of these in some way or function since 2015.
Okay.
Jeff, I believe, has probably done more with TRC
I've probably
over the
done
years.
a dozen, maybe 2 dozen, just as a consultant to developers on the environmental pieces of things.
And
the AMP owns 40 megawatts of solar in the state of Massachusetts.
Already in Mass?
Already in Mass. We own and operate 40 megawatts there. That's about 7 or 8 projects that we have. And then we also have more. We also have some single axis tracking projects in Minnesota as well.
Now in Mass, this general area, Eastern Mass, Western Mass, or scattered throughout?
Scattered throughout, we own some in the south of Boston, so
Okay.
up towards the Cape, and
Yep.
we have others here in Western Mass as well.
Okay.
Could you take us through the process of the actual construction? So from erosion control, clearing, just so that the audience understands kind of the installation process. I know you have a typical construction sequence in here, but it's
Gotcha.
typical, and we have a lot of people that are concerned. So let's take it from the beginning.
Yes, ma'am. So
And timeframe. with
yeah,
that.
I'll start with the time frame. Start to finish on the site, think 12 months, with most of the activity taking place in the middle 6. So if we're talking about, if I imagine we had a building permit right now, we would look at probably 2 weeks to a month to get people mobilized. The first thing that'll go in, and this will take about a week, less than a week, S&M Farms moves fast. We'll go in and install a silt fence with a straw bale system right next to it, all the way along the limit of cutting, and that will effectively define the limit of cutting. The next month will be, once that's installed, they'll install an initial driveway, which will probably be mostly mud, but we'll have some gravel to it up front while they bring the trees out. So in coloring inside the numbers, they will start taking the trees down in sections, and we'll probably have, they'll more or less make a big vein in the middle, then a bunch of spider webs out to clear the trees. A lot of those will probably be stockpiled on site to haul away as is convenient, because we're going to want to get stumping started in that second month, and we're also going to want to get these guys built in that second month as well. Closer to month 3, while this thing is still being cleared and stumped, so going from a forest to a field and then being stabilized with grass, we're probably going to have equipment start to be delivered. So the first thing that'll arrive is the racking. That's the steel stuff that goes in the ground and eventually gets built into the arrays. That will get stockpiled somewhere on the site that is hopefully down here. That's kind of why we have it, because I don't necessarily want to stockpile something where we're trying to stabilize, because then you don't get any grass right there. But somewhere on the site we have to stockpile a lot of this stuff. And there's about a month's worth of flat just deliveries here. So it's a lot of steel, and then we've got a lot of modules right on top of it. So think that prep and delivery is, say, month 3 to 4. And then once you've got all of your components, let's say we just go west to east, and they'll start installing the foundations to all of these, row by row. And you can imagine them still clearing and finishing up down here while they start some of the installation of the racking and the foundations for that. So driving the screws in or driving the piles in, and then starting to build the tables on top of those. Tables are what hold the array, the cross pieces and such. And then you'll get, say, about this far with all the foundations and the racking, and they'll start installing the modules. And they'll just work in a wave down the hill. So you might at some point have modules being affixed, racking being put together, stumping taking place, closer to down here, and maybe even some clearing still taking place, but those guys work pretty fast. They'll probably be off the site. And then, of course, before that, these guys have been installed. So that brings us up to starting with months, 3 and 4, where the installation takes place. That will that will continue for 3-4 months on a project this size, but that kind of also depends on the season. If we're coming up on winter, we'll probably move quicker because no one likes to work outside in the cold, so we staff more people. If we start this thing in March, there's not quite as much of a rush because everyone likes working in the summer. And I expect they work east to west the whole time. In the middle of that, they will install the pad. Once everything's cleared, they'll install the roads relatively early because they're just so much better for getting around the site. And then by months 7 to 9, most of this work the heavy work will be done. The loudest part's going to be tree clearing, and then if we use piles, it will be installing the piles because they get banged in like a hammer. If screws are relatively more quiet because it's just like a power drill and a little tread machine. And months, say 9 to 12, is mostly fiddling around relative to the manpower that was on site before. So you might be talking about installing your plantings, relatively low impact work, doing a lot of stabilization work, and also it'll be people walking around wiring the array. Modules are installed, they need to be plugged together, they need to be run into their electrical strings all the way to the middle. All that trenching would have been done beforehand in that first, say, months 2 to 4, and they'd get everything electrically put together after they physically put it together. And then the back end will be however long it takes National Grid to do their scope of work to the street here. And for instance, if National Grid says, and this is not an unrealistic time frame, it'll take us 18 months to get this work done. 6 months of waiting, 12 months of work, or 12 months of waiting, 6 months of work. We will try to time the start, given the seasons, so that we finish it roughly the same time they do. Because no one wants to build this thing and pay for it and have it sit there for 6 months to a year, collecting interest on your construction loan. And then the back, and that's the end. I would expect, most of the heavy equipment, so let's call it months 2 through 9, are probably the busiest months. Clearing on the front, deliveries and construction on the back. On a site this size, you're probably looking at a peak of near 100 people in the middle of construction and tapering off on each side.
At some point, when you do your clearing and there's a plan for your cutting, and can you estimate, how many trips of tractor trailers are coming in and out with trees? I mean, at some point, somebody kind of knows, at least the people on that end. And then how many trips of delivering, does it end up at, 1,500 trips of tractor trailers coming down from there?
So
And then what happens at plan with all the mud being drawn out, because it happened around the corner of U Street, where they cleared, 16 acres of forest. And all of that came running into the streets, as you saw, the dirt and everything, and there needs to be a plan to clean that up, because, the roads are being sort of maintained by the town, and we want to make sure they don't erode worse because of this, and, well, there should be a plan.
Yes, sir. So what we typically do especially with deliveries, like this is not a huge street, excuse me. So the first step, construction bond for the road quality before we start. We get out there with your building inspector or some equivalent. We look at the road, we take some pictures, we document it, for a certain distance north and south, and we figure out which way our trucks are coming from. Probably from the north, from the pike and the highway. And then we put a bond in place to cover any damages that we run into, due to the trucks, because there will be quite a few. Typically, we do a forest cutting plan for this as well, so we'll find whoever the forester is to do the clearing. They would be the people. I'll talk to some of my forester guys and see what they would guesstimate per acre, for this kind of site. And then we can do the math roughly on I'll talk to some of my construction folks on what we get on a flatbed and just start doing some math on what we talk about and get you a ballpark. And that's also here, we certainly not against it if we think we need it. We have paved aprons before on these things just off the street. That's one reason we really love this bigger item here compared to this.
Yep.
Because if we want to have 100-foot wide giant tractor trailers or happy construction entrance, we can do that temporarily and then size it right back down. Replant some stuff, make it look like a nice residentially driveway after we're done, and we don't have to have the big trucks on site. Because long term, your pickup trucks.
Yeah.
No, makes sense.
It's just general cleanup on a weekly basis, just to get all the dirt and whatever,
Certainly.
and hump that pavement, and, so that there's no runoff into the street, or whatever.
Are you the owners of the property, or are you leasing the property?
So we will be leasing the property on a 20 to 45-year basis.
Currently, this is an approved subdivision plan. Has it been filed with the Registry of Deeds?
Yes.
Yes.
So, do we have to change the filing? Do they have to change the
Yeah, in
filing
your
on this?
packet, there's an email from town council. It's actually regarding Evergreen Estates, which has a similar thing going on. And what they're recommending is that basically, one A&R plan be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, combining all the entire property
Okay.
into one lot.
Gotcha. So we have to
And
walk.
that would get recorded at the registry as a condition of the approval.
Right.
And in doing so, there's a series of no-build covenants on the property.
Correct.
So that's relevant here.
Yes.
They would not be able to get a building permit if those existed.
Right, and they are right now.
So we would have to take care of that through conditioning in the decision. And it's detailed in the town council email I circulated.
We have to walk forward with that carefully, precisely, because of course, if this weren't to go forward under the incentive program, my owners don't want to lose the permitted subdivision and all the covenants with it.
It would be conditioned in the approval, and then it would be at your discretion when it
Because
happens.
we could do it that
If
way.
it doesn't happen, then you don't have a solar project.
Perfect, and that's the trick. We'd have to have the site plan review to get the solar project, so you just walk with your shoelaces tied together, and we get it done, patiently.
Yeah,
We can work that out.
How many pilings or screws are expected to be installed for the post?
So variable question. If we do fixed tilt and we do screws, it's 4 corners like a table, a literal table. If we do piles, it's 1 center post, and you only have 2 of them. If you do these guys, it's roughly a post every 6 feet, a single post. For the product that AMP likes to use, they've used in Minnesota a lot. And I don't have a count on the distance
Yeah,
for those.
How many panels, roughly?
Ooh, let's see. It depends on the mod.
Well, you could base it back
Yeah.
on your per
So
panel.
so 11.2 megawatts DC divided by 400 a panel.
Right.
So that's, I think that's probably 30,000. Let's call it
Yeah.
30,000. That would be 12. But you never know exactly what the efficiency. You might get 400s, you might get 380s. If we build this next year, you might get 440s. It just depends what's on the market. So the individual row spacing and such can change based on what you get there if you're aiming. And to be fair, right now, when we did this, 4 months ago, when we started this, 11.2 was what we thought was the ideal. Right now, I think we're probably a little closer to 10 DC, which would mean the same footprint, just a couple less rows, and we spread everything out a little bit.
So could we go back to the install and the stockpiling of the topsoil? So you're not removing any topsoil?
Not
correct?
allowed to. Can't leave the site.
Okay. So when you're saying that you are clearing the topsoil, so you're removing and stockpiling topsoil, and then what do you do? So you've stumped it, right? Then you're scraping all the topsoil.
I think that it's a verbal exaggeration. We
Okay.
tend to take the top inch or two just out of practicality for stumping and clearing.
Remove
rest of
and
it-
stockpile topsoil after erosion and sediment control measures have been installed.
Gotcha.
Okay. It says the topsoil shall be seeded immediately after stockpiling in order to stabilize the slope. So is that not a true statement
I
under the
think-
typical construction sequence?
I think it is partially true that some topsoil has to be, we can't leave it all right there because some will come off.
I would like to know exactly what you're doing.
So roughly the top inch and a half will come off through the stumping, and a little bit will get cleared so they can install the piles on relatively firm soil. The rest will be stockpiled somewhere on site and will be seeded
As a hill.
more or less as a hill before it would get redistributed around site after we've installed the rest of it.
Where is it going to go to be redistributed if there's panels everywhere?
If you're grading it, you're gonna grade the site then.
You're gonna
So-
grade, no.
No, the site doesn't
No.
get great. We follow the contours.
Okay.
You can't stump it without having some leftover soil, wood mass, etc.
That's- yeah.
It would get. We might put it down here if we've got extra not to leave the site.
But
not
you
kinda
something
need to
I-
know.
You need to show that.
When you're saying stumping, you're grinding, you're not taking out the
Yeah,
stumps.
we don't
So,
rip
right,
stumps
I don't
out here
know if it's-
typically, but it creates more soil mass with the chips and the stuff we don't want to leave. We don't want to leave chips all over the downhill 20 acres. They float downhill. We've had that happen on sites before where it looks nice, then you get a 2-year storm.
Well, it depends
And
on the
they're all-
density of the forest. I mean, it could be, one tree every
Yeah,
100
and
square
it's
feet.
saying all stumps and wood shall be taken off-site and
There you go,
disposed
so you won't have it.
accordingly.
You can sell chips. We can't get rid of
Wood,
soil.
stumps.
Yeah, you can,
It's saying removing of stumps.
But he says he's not removing stumps.
We're grinding
Under
the stumps. I guess-
Typical so I think that we need a
Clarification.
actual construction
Okay.
sequence, not a typical one, this
ma'am.
boilerplate, so that we can understand where the topsoil is going, because the way that I'm reading this is that it's gonna be a big mound, and you're gonna seed it, and that's the end of the story, because you're not able
Yeah.
to remove anything off-site.
So, on smaller or simpler sites, typically whatever we would strip often goes right back on as we're seeding.
Where?
In the
When
array
does it
area,
go-
in the
when?
array area before the tablings
Pilings.
pilings might be in,
Okay.
but then they're just piles. You can drive down them and redistribute
Spreading it
soil.
out.
You would do that before you install the tops of the racks that are so much bigger.
Right, right. You know that.
So they go in between every row
I mean,
and
if they're 8 to 12 feet apart.
dust the
The
feet.
Bobcat.
And if, in a typical, like a fixed tilt array, there might be a 12 or a 14-foot row in between each
So
one.
I have a question. Why are you disturbing? If I know all about helical piers, I know about that. I know about driving piles. I know, you can just drive through your topsoil as long as you get resistance, whatever to your whatever your set mark is, and right.
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
Get down to a
So
full
why,
test.
if you're gonna grind a stump to below, to a grade,
Mhm.
so that you can then, it doesn't matter where you drive the pile, you can drive it through a tree if you had to, as long as it gets somewhere. But it's
Yeah, it's-
so why are you
the goal
messing
is-
with the topsoil?
The goal
at
is
all?
not to remove the topsoil, but some of it inevitably comes off.
Right.
Like that's what I'm saying by an inch. Like we're not grading this thing down to a smooth, 5%. But inevitably we do remove and move some topsoil during construction. That is
What are you
boilerplate language.
moving it with? A
Large-
Bobcat, a loader, a bulldozer?
I would have to go to the construction guys. It's not. I imagine it's a front loader. If you get it piled up somewhere, or if we have too much wood mass from stumps that you need to go. Yeah, it's
What it is, you're going in there with skidders, fella bunches and everything else. Those alone just tear up the topsoil. So then you gotta go in, you gotta kind of move it around and clean it all back up. You start getting big skidders and all that on the site to log it out, you're gonna disturb
The
the
place is gonna be a
topsoil.
mess. It's gonna be.
Right, so they're gonna go in there with bobcats and stuff, clean it all up and get the grade back to its natural contour, then drive in the piles.
Right, but they're not making a large, huge
I
pile.
want to say
out
that.
to get
I
somewhere.
wanted to say
Okay.
that.
So yeah, so we should have that on a plan. If what you've submitted is boilerplate, we should have it specific to the site. Because I'm not understanding what's happening with the topsoil. You know that you can't take it on site, and I'm picturing you're stripping it, putting it in piles, and seeding it.
Little too dramatic, but yes, ma'am. We'll get you a full.
I'm very dramatic.
We'll get you a
But that's
full-
what it reads.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, ma'am.
Verbatim.
We
in
will
this
get you
piece
a
of paper.
full construction schedule and description from our construction manager, who will run
So-
this site respectively.
Do you know
next time.
specifically the depth? What is the depth of the pilings and the type of swale? So
Variable.
you've got.
I'm afraid they push the pile in until they try to pull it
Do
out
they
and
push it or
resist us.
drive it?
I'm gonna go with drive.
yeah.
You could screw it too.
They can also.
Hammer.
You go down to it's called you do a pull test where you try to pull it
Yeah.
out of the ground to a certain resistance.
Yeah.
If you have great soils, it may not have to go that far. If you have horrible soils,
You have to run
it
the-
has to go even
You
further.
do know the soils because you have the soil mapping in your
Yes.
application.
And I personally
So,
do not know depth
For
per
next
pile.
time, you should probably find out the answer.
The information you need to determine how to size a pile is you need to do a geotechnical boring test
Okay.
in order to determine what depths you need
Yeah.
for the engineer to stamp the actual design for the building permit.
Okay.
That information is not available on a standard soils map. You need to go and you need to do it.
We could do borings.
You need to go to the full 25.
Yeah, test
It-
pits and
we're-
borings all
And
over
that's
the
gonna be
site.
required, right, for your building permit
That
application?
would be-
You will need to do that.
We would need to do that for our building permit.
And what
yes.
frequency are you putting borings, using your borings? How many square feet, you know, how does that work out?
On a site this size, I would probably do 5 to 7 borings
Per,
on
For
the
the
site.
site.
on the entire site?
Yeah, okay.
You've got one soil type.
So one every
Throughout the main
5 acres or
area.
something like that?
And or test pits, depending on.
That's pretty,
So I think
Not
we
a
just
lot.
need a clarification of the construction sequence. We understand that you're not supposed to take soil off, but we need that in writing, for our earth removal as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just don't picture it being stockpiled and then respread. I don't know why you would have to do that.
Well, they don't
Just
show a
respread it.
spot to leave it.
Yeah, so
on
they
the
are spreading
site.
it out.
Right.
Okay, but that's not what it says in this
No, I
typical
agree with you.
construction
There's-
sequence.
And what, you know, my first comment is, this thing's littered with the phrase permit set only. And I object to that, because we're not permitting a concept like your application to the state. We're permitting the project. So what we want to see and what we need to see is the project. The technical details, to make sure that it's a viable project, you need to think about what Tracy's talking about with regard to, what are you doing with the stockpile of topsoil? Is it gonna be just off the limits of the solar array, or is it within the solar array? If you're gonna spread it, address that through notes on the plan, or you know, whatever it is you're planning on doing, you need to
Lay it out.
lay it out for
Yeah.
us, okay?
Just lay it out.
That's my first comment, but continue.
Yeah, so when it's not done, we can point to the note on the plan to the person that is actually doing the work, saying this is how it has to be done.
Yes, ma'am. The only caveat I'd ask against that is that we have to go bid this work out for construction. The specific, say, racking product we use may be a different brand, but the process would be the same. But if you're asking, I need you to promise to use screws or piles, be that
That's
specific.
not
I
what we're
didn't say
asking.
that.
Just making sure.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
didn't
an
say
important
that part.
aspect, because if the piles are driven, it's my understanding that that could make some noise,
It would be more noise.
okay?
But at this point, it's, I guess, premature is not a word I want to use to describe which one we prefer or do. A lot of that will come from the geotechnical report. When you look at soils and they go, you know, the engineering and construction companies will say we very much recommend A product over B product.
Right.
And, you know, I'm more than happy to come back to you guys, as well as, of course, the building permit inspector with that. But at this point, it is earlier in the process that I'm used to specifying the specific racking,
Yep.
that kind of product.
Can you not predict, based on the soil mapping, what type of geotechnical results you're going to get?
It's also a factor,
that map?
it's somewhat
Maybe
predictable,
with
I
your
guess.
colleague.
But
It
It's
probably is somewhat predictable.
it's also a
Where the
factor of
heck is
what
this?
market prices are. I mean, anything
Yeah.
from the steel prices to the modules we get, all of that goes into what a construction company would recommend and put, you know, a budget
So it's
together on.
not based on particularly the soil conditions, based on market conditions of your materials?
Both.
Everything.
It's both.
Yeah.
I mean, they
What's
may go
available.
find horrible rocky undersoil there. That's just super glacial tilt, and they'll say, we'd love to use piles, but half of them are going to get rejected because they don't go through rock very well. We recommend a screw. And if AMP says we very much want to do single axis tracking, well, here's a screw foundation for single axis tracking. You could get very clean soils beneath it, and they say, piles are great. Here's a pile product for single axis tracking or fixed tilt. That's the kind of, I guess, discretion I will need or would like for the construction sequence later prior to a
So you're
building's
looking
permit.
not at bearing capacity, you're looking at uplift
Yes, sir.
for this, which is different, because if you start hitting boulder outcroppings, you've got a different situation. That
Screws are
would be great for bearing, but not for uplift.
exactly, and the advantage to screws is that they can rock drill them pretty easily and then screw right through it. With a pile, you tend to have to dig it out and use concrete, to get your
It's much more
uplift.
invasive.
Oh, it's horrible. So, just like nails and screws, piles are cheaper if you can get away with it well. But in New England, that is a real hit or miss proposition on what your soils look like.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a good idea of what soils are out there.
I will tell you,
Specifically.
every construction manager I've ever talked to wants to use screws. Every finance person I've ever talked to wants to use piles because they're cheap. And every construction company's happy to use piles and give you a change order.
Yeah,
Okay, anybody else on the board have any questions?
good so far.
Bill, any comments?
Yeah, a couple of things. As I indicated, the permit only said I want taken off the drawings. We're not talking about only permit. I was wondering if there's any specialty training that you would suggest for the fire department relative to these kinds of facilities.
Not, I guess, special at this point for Massachusetts history with solar. The only difference would be the battery systems. What I would want to go do is talk to your fire department and see if they have the equipment they need for an electrical fire with the batteries and make sure they're comfortable with the schematics around that. If they're missing the quantity of foam they may need, that's something we would look to provide. Because it is obviously a big box of lithium.
Yeah.
So you can imagine a scenario where everything works like it should and it turns off, but runaway fires happen. It's a
Yeah.
big box of batteries. It gets hot. Other modules burst. That's the worst case scenario. And I'm not knowing what your fire department has on stock. I don't know how they would treat that kind of electrical fire. That's the, I guess, training / equipment would be.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm not sure if there's like, I don't know enough about it, and that's why I'm asking, and I'm certainly gonna talk to the chief about
Yeah.
this. But if there's equipment that could be stored on site locally, that might make more sense to having at the fire station.
Fine any way that works best for the fire department.
That won't help anyway, right? So-
That could be fun.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I agree about the house lot showing the perimeter, around the perimeter. So the way we typically do that is, you'll show the actual property boundaries, the houses in this case, and you'll also put the owner's name on each parcel.
Could you add the distance from the nearest module to the house?
Will do.
Please, thank you.
In case of a lithium fire, which you say, you've spoken quite frankly about it happens, is there any particular gassing or anything that becomes emitted through that fire or the leak that would become into the air? And is there anything that could plume to somebody or anybody nearby? Just
Not that
asking.
I'm aware of. I mean, it's a somewhat open-ended question on the
You got
chemical
an
side.
you
but-
have one of those engineers, just have
It's-
Yes, sir.
address
I'll
it.
say on something like that, you're driving down every road every day with Teslas, which is loaded with lithium batteries.
Right.
And you're driving alongside of them every day on every
This is
road.
the only opportunity we have to ask these questions.
Right, but I'm
That's
just
why
saying.
I don't want to disregard any of this.
It's one of those deals
Yeah.
where they are out there, like you said. I
Right.
mean, the
But
lithium-
absolutely happy to put that all
But
in writing
again,
and on our
dot the I,
word.
cross the T, we have an
Yeah.
opportunity
Oh, yeah.
here, these are professionals, extreme professionals, so let's get those answers.
Well, I'm sure you have emergency response plans for
Yeah.
your
For-
project.
yeah.
So I would suggest submitting a sample one at this point before you finalize something, and then you could have the chief take a look at that as well.
And we'll do that now and as well as at the building permit when we have the exact, the count and size of the
Yeah.
batteries, because that will change based on the DC size.
Yep.
And we'll get the, equipment-specific plans in place then as well.
I haven't looked at the stormwater calculations yet, but I'm concerned by what I see. I would think you're going to need some sort of intermediate check dams or something along the slope in order to dissipate the energy. As you know, sheet flow gets to shallow concentrated flow after 50 feet, and therefore I'm concerned that erosion will be a significant issue for the site. I'm concerned because we do have some issues with 2 culverts on Shore Road right now that discharge into Wallam Lake. Particularly during your construction, I'm also concerned because, based on the plan that you talked about, you're clearing up at the high end, and by the time you get to the low end, you're gonna have a clear site with unmitigated flow going down to
Stabilization
those
is
2
right.
culverts.
Key on this.
So what I would suggest is that you start the opposite. You start at the low end and work toward the high end. Build those basins first and then work in that direction.
Could you put a linear, what is called linear dry well, it's basically you dig down a couple of feet and you put crushed stone in there, opposite the pitch, whatever it might be in 100-foot increments or 200 feet, but at least you can then capture that runoff, and then it recharges back into the ground, and it never even gets to those basins.
I am thinking of stone for those check dams. I think that
That'd be great.
makes the most
Yeah.
sense.
I've used that on another site where they went every 15 feet in elevation. They just
Right.
put in a check dam across the whole site.
Right.
I would have to, of course, to defer to Jeff on, we're not allowed to increase or decrease significantly the runoff to starve or flood a wetland. But other than that, we love check dams. The arrays go right over them.
Right.
They're perfect for
So there's some sort of neutral calculation as a forest might provide that you might try to equate, so you don't become
Yeah.
overcharged or less.
And that's-
And Tracy knows more about
In
that.
the construction sequence, you're mentioning reseeding before the pilings are going in or whatever, whenever you're reseeding, you wanna mention that.
We'll
Because
start as soon as
We don't know about the stabilization.
As soon as you stump, you start reseeding. Just because that, especially on a big smooth site like this.
I thought you were grinding the stumps. I thought you weren't stumping.
Well, that's what I mean by stumping, grinding.
Well,
Grinding
Sorry.
in place
Different
versus
diction.
stumping.
Yeah.
Different diction. I'm using stumping to destruction of the stumps, grinding in place, etc.
stumping is like,
Yeah, ripping it
So
out.
are
It's
you
more of a s-
going to be rooting the stumps and removing them and, or grinding them?
He's grinding
We,
To grade.
whatever you
Yeah.
wanna do, you need to let us know in
And
the
define it.
construction sequence.
define it clearly.
It is saying stumping, meaning removing it, you know, totally, not grinding with a grinder.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to keep Bill
Yeah,
going, because he's going to have to leave our meeting.
So I see
Go to
this
the selectmen's meeting.
other roadway, I think that was the original subdivision location, the road for the subdivision. I would suggest that that be at least constructed to a standard for an emergency access egress and not just there for visual.
This
effect.
item right here.
Yes,
One reason we have not done that is because doing that construction will put us in the immediate vicinity of a wetland.
I understand.
So,
Needs to be
This is a safety issue.
constructed, though, eventually.
It would just be permitted, okay? So you need to go to Concom and get a permit to build within that area.
and that's, why is that, I guess my question, if we had an original subdivision, we have a current access here,
Yes.
what is the, I guess, necessity of a second?
Emergency. Emergency.
Also loop the site.
If for some reason there was a problem out there and the fire department couldn't get to that location for that first road, they have an alternative, or another way out if you're inside the site.
right, this is not like 22 houses, sleepy, people sleeping at night. This is a machine. This is a commercial industrial operation.
So you wanted to see an emergency access from the middle area
So I guess,
out the other way?
No.
No.
Oh,
From that road that goes out
to the
to,
modules.
Through a
he's
gate,
pointing
to the
to it.
perimeter,
so from right here
Oh.
up to here,
out to the
Yeah.
street.
out to the street? Gotcha. So
This is another access.
it would require us to go back to the Concom and ask for an NOI, which is, our goal was to stay out of the wetlands entirely for the process, and
The other thing is that.
You're
the
going through
fire-
an ANRAD now, right?
that's the process now, so.
I was gonna say, the fire chief, I've never heard of a fire chief requiring two entrances to a solar facility. I mean,
I'm not a
can we,
fire
can we can coordinate with him and if it's,
I feel better leaving it natural. I mean, you get the one access.
We'll get a letter from the fire chief, says he doesn't need second means, that's all.
That's fine.
But it needs to be addressed from the fire chief so that we feel that you've answered the question.
I've always thought any site, I don't care if it's a solar array or, it's always safer with two access and egress points. But,
If possible.
now, during the construction, you say you're gonna get up to 100 workers.
And just a ballpark.
I understand.
Yeah, number.
What's the plan for parking and for these? Are they all gonna have their own vehicles, I assume, and they'll all park on site?
No street parking, none whatsoever. So here at the gate, for say a construction trailer site, check
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
But then the rest of them, they can park in the site along and on the
So-
roads.
So I would like to define that on the drawings as to
Okay.
what the plan is for the parking. And these delivery vehicles, I know if it's some construction projects, you get 20 dump trucks at the same time. Is that gonna be the case when you have these panels arriving?
Queuing.
Well, that's my concern. And, are you gonna get hit with one
One big
big
week
delivery?
or day of
Yeah.
row
wide-
after
Yeah, how
row.
wide is that access gonna be? If you have tractor trailers going in and out at the same
100
time?
feet.
So there will be,
The width?
we would have a traffic, I mean,
700.
if that scenario, I'm sure we have someone directing traffic. We are happy to provide fun for someone on
So
the
I guess
street as
where I'm
well
going
if the
with
town
this
needs
is,
it.
we probably need a few paragraphs talking specifically about traffic and what the plan is for traffic during construction. And so, you know,
Will do.
I like the idea of the surety. And I'm gonna get you a letter, I haven't completed it yet, but that's really the extent of my comments at this point.
As well as a surety for decommissioning.
The surety for, they talk about decommissioning briefly in here, they don't talk about a surety value, so I guess if you could give us some calculations on what you think the current value of the decommissioning is, and a projected value after the
Will
life
do.
of the
So
facility.
decommissioning is an odd topic. For the first, let's say easily 5 years of the array, and let me back up. There is little to no chance this thing would ever be abandoned for the first 20 years while you have an incentive contract. Because there is a mortgage for the array. Bank's gonna get its money, they don't care who owns it, they care that it runs. The practical decommissioning value for the first 5 to 10 years is the value of the array itself. If AMP just disappeared on year 1, you've got a nearly brand new solar array that someone will come by and take out of the ground for you. Because it will, let's call it $1.50 a watt,
Well, they just
for just
assume
the
the
solar.
lease.
It would probably
They
just
would take it
assume
out
the
of the
lease, but
ground,
just
yeah,
imagine
yeah.
in the worst case scenario,
Yeah.
that there was no more lease. Someone would just come by the array, deconstruct it, and take it away on the cheap. They would be happy to do that. So that's the majority of the decommissioning bond value.
Imagine this.
Yeah, it would be fun, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it? Nothing.
And then, in reverse, all of these conversations, in reverse.
Then we could restump.
Perfect. And the back 10 years is more where you're thinking the classic decommissioning bond scenario, where the array has lost its commercial value because it could be, it's just too old, and you're starting to look at a cost that sits with the town,
that's
independent of the array, and there, would then have labor rates and salvage value and all that stuff calculated in.
What is your estimated cost of construction?
I mean, generically about $1.50 a watt for the array itself. At this size, maybe 40 cents a
What are you
watt.
putting on your building permit application for cost of construction?
I don't know yet. We'd have to get estimates from construction companies.
In the rough and tough.
You've
have a
done
number?
36 of these.
And I
you
don't know
have
if
a
we're gonna-
flavor.
They don't know.
But that's
what
sort of
size
roughly. I
they're
mean, it
gonna
might be $1. That's what I was like. $1.50 is a ballpark for the array.
Yeah.
40 cents a watt is a ballpark for the battery as designed. That could get as low as $1.50 all around if we shrunk the DC, which shrinks the battery need. It could also swing wildly with the module market, steel tariffs, new tariffs, all
Could go
sorts of
$2.
stuff. Whether I build this,
I don't know.
whether we start building this in, March at the very earliest possible window, or whether we have to have this in the ground in 18 months from our incentive allocation, which is roughly December. So we could also be looking at building it in 2020. I can't predict.
We'll be
the
really
tariffs.
old then.
At least a year older.
Yeah. Okay.
He's got his calculator out. He's got a calculator out. He's a good man.
Yeah, we need to.
Rough and tough, that's all.
But
rough
I
and
mean,
tough.
roughly think $10 a watt or 10 megawatts, $2 a watt all in, $20 million. That's a very ballparky number.
It's a big building permit.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the board? have any?
Someone's up to get larger.
So right now, we're good.
We need some building inspectors.
We'll get some more.
Any further presentations?
What is that?
Anything you guys like to hear?
Right, good, thank you.
Nope, we'll,
It's all right.
you know what we
We'll
want.
get started.
Yeah, so we've got all sorts
Got
of.
it recorded, okay.
Anybody in the audience?
Yeah, I will do that.
It's always interesting when seniors take notes for me. It's always gonna be a lot of homework later.
Okay, this is a public hearing. I'll take a few questions from the audience if people have some. It's gonna run much longer because we have an agenda to stick to, so when I recognize you, give your name and your address, and then,
Walter Kavanaugh and my wife Linda, we're 271 Wallen Lake Road. We're that property right there, right next to the entrance.
okay?
Really excited I got that right.
One thing I would like to just suggest is that, well, we and the first house on Birch Hill Road will be the biggest ones impacted, and maybe even a couple houses down. But I don't see anything that shows how close to them you're gonna be. So just to protect them, can maybe get something on the Birch Hill Road properties?
Yeah, so the same lots and houses and distances.
Yep. Yeah, we're gonna.
The setback, 50-foot setback that you have, is that cleared or like all along the property line?
So this hump is the limit of cutting, this humped line. I believe it's 50 here, then it goes to 75 along the entrance in here. And to be fair, for you guys right there, if you want something planted, just let us know, whatever it is. Like,
Redwood trees, please.
ooh. That's the one needs to be arrayed. So there'll be very small redwood trees.
I do want to say,
Yeah.
along that line, 50 feet is a remarkably short distance, so don't think that there's going to be any type of screening from the existing forest that's there to the array. It will open up tremendously as a result of clearing for that. So I do suggest, at least along the edge where there's houses, that we do get some kind of submittals showing screening.
We will get you a landscape architect. TRC has one we've used before. We'll get you, it typically is a mix of evergreen type trees and just evergreen type bushes. So you don't have like a one species weakness. Get some up, some tall and some short mix over time.
And noting on the
Solid
plan, the
fencing.
undisturbed buffer.
Okay.
Solid fencing would be something to be considered.
So,
Solid, maintenance-free fencing.
so not like a chain link, but something
Chain link
else.
does nothing for screening.
Chain link with the
Yeah.
inserts?
No, like a decent looking fence that's maintenance-free so that in 20 years it looks the same as it did the first day, maybe. Just along, particularly along the roadway.
Yeah, I think they can talk
But they can talk about it, just about.
them better.
Okay.
And I'll take my trees if you can't do redwood. Is the hours that, during the construction, and is it like a 8 to 5, or are they gonna work through the night?
No.
No. We have
standard construction hours that are boilerplated that they'll be allowed to work. It's from 7:30 in the morning, I believe.
No, I think 7, and we allow equipment warm up 6:45 in
Yeah.
the winter.
In the winter, yeah,
Um,
until,
And it's Monday through Saturday, I think, until usually 5 PM, I think is
Yeah.
what we allow. And then we have a number of holidays.
yes.
We've been through this.
We got some holidays are no,
And with being solar, obviously that's generating electricity all during the day. So one thing I read is that most of the maintenance that goes on if stuff has to happen occurs overnight.
Not that I'm, so if there's something broken, it typically disconnects itself. I guess it is possible that if the operator would like someone to get out there in the evening, if they're looking to do a larger maintenance that say takes an inverter offline, there are only 2. So half the array goes down. But typically it's never a question I've been asked before. That's exciting.
Maintenance is typically done during daylight hours.
Yeah.
Keep it to the same
So we
hours.
need to
If there's-
condition
Well, no, you
that.
can't.
Condition that.
Unless there's a fire or emergency.
It's something, sometimes, like you say, a transformer or something, and it'll rise at 5 o'clock. Usually they'll try to get that stuff in that night so it's back up and running the next day.
But then that's a loss of
But
income per se.
It's also sitting 800 feet in the inside of the field.
Yeah, but there's still a truck going by someone's house at midnight or 2 in the morning, which is not, it's a little
It'd be a pickup-
disconcerting.
Pickup truck.
Yeah, but it's still,
yeah, the normal operating.
Different than if you have a transformer
So
blow
are we
on your
saying
street.
maintenance is also limited to
They're gonna come out in the middle of the night if
Yeah,
you
they're
lose
gonna-
the transformer.
Same
or
thing,
something.
right?
Could we say maybe
They're always
let's-
on the
let's,
pole in front of my
yeah.
house there.
Okay, let's not
Yeah.
keep, let's keep on subject here, so we
Yeah.
can,
So-
finish Bill.
major maintenance, daytime construction hours, replacement of inverters, large flatbed stuff,
Yeah,
pickup truck stuff as required.
yeah.
yeah,
Makes
that'd be
sense.
fine.
That's what,
So it's when there's a complaint, what is that complaint gonna entail? And what are we excluding from the general operation versus emergency or maintenance?
Let me put it this way, suggest some language so we can take a look at it, because
Right.
I don't want us,
Yeah.
yeah.
we don't want to steer it.
Well, I don't want to
Steer it.
miss something or omit something that might be important to them, or vice versa,
Right.
limit them.
To the residents, too.
We'll take first shot.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
all right. Name and address?
Jennifer Doddridge, 3 Angel Road. Couple of things. Has anyone talked to either Rhode Island or what would be the impacts on Wallam Lake? Because this is going to change the water flow going into Wallam and coming down our hill. Birch Hill's already a nightmare. Shore Drive is flooded out most of the time now. And this is gonna make a real impact on our daily lives.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Name and address?
I'm Jean Lawrence, 119 Shore Road. I sort of just want to second what was said, and I appreciated Mr. Condo's comments about putting drainage or some kind of stopgap along the way. I am worried about the water and the flow and impervious surface. The grass can't grow under these things. It looks to me like you're totally covering the area with panels, like there's not space in between them.
There is, oh, I'm sorry. I'll
there
respond
space in between?
as requested.
Okay. Go ahead.
There is spacing between. This is a pretty dense layout. That is a true statement. This is all 11.2 in here. The grass grows slower, but it does grow. That's why the stabilization, not just during construction, but for the years after until the grass is well established, is I'd expect inspections, conditions, and perhaps even sort of a, let's call it a landscaping and stabilization bond is not a bad way to go about that. I've seen landscaping bonds for say 3 years to make sure that we just don't install things and let them go. That ensures those guys get a good start. Stabilization is something you can mix right into that.
There will be a bond.
There we go.
Related to that, how many projects have you done like this that are on a slope running down into a pristine lake?
Right into a lake is not somewhere I typically work because you have to set back so much, and almost all of that land has already been purchased.
Next to a lake,
All right,
yeah.
you'll answer your question.
Into wetlands next to a lake. Let's see, Webster, check.
You've done them
Large
before.
wetlands. I've done them before, but and the fallback I have to the question before about the runoff and that as well is that it is Jeff's job, the engineer, the town's job to review the stormwater. We're not allowed to increase or decrease the discharge rate on the site.
Correct.
Which also ends up as volume. And Jeff can speak to that
we
all
do,
day.
We do work next to very sensitive areas routinely, and we'll double check our calcs again and check into the whole concept of check dams as a double insurance type thing. But I think we can do this, no problem. This is what we typically do in construction. And the whole idea is to ensure that runoff doesn't increase from the site.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Paul Bruley, 4 Kearney Road. Can you tell me how the property is zoned and whether it's an allowed use in the zone?
It's zoned rural agricultural,
Correct.
and the use is allowed.
The use is allowed under state law, under something called the Dover Amendment, Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3.
Thank you, Bill.
So technically, they don't have to comply with current zoning.
Is that for any solar panel bill or just commercial application?
That's a good question. I'd have to do research on it. I don't know what the answer is to that.
We don't have a bylaw in town.
We do not.
Therefore, it is allowed in all zones.
Correct.
But that bylaw Massachusetts law, that
Falls under it.
Correct.
that goes over us anyway.
Typically
so.
religious or school.
Okay, I'll take a couple more questions in the back.
Yeah, Dennis Mahalik, 415 Northeast Main Street. I got a bunch of questions. One thing, is there stone walls on the property? Anybody that knows it?
Of course.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
What would happen with the stone walls when you do that? You're not supposed to destroy stone walls in Massachusetts, as far as I
It's
understand.
historic. If it, I guess only if it's historic, not. But this is a.
All right.
All right, we'll find out, Dennis.
The other thing is, looking for how they control the wild, the weeds and stuff and growth. Are they gonna use pesticides when they keep it just all grass? I mean, how do you keep it grass without having trees infiltrate into the
We
weeds?
mow. So inside the fence
You actually
will be
mow it,
will be mowed
Okay.
at regular vegetation.
Any
You probably
fertilizers?
say again, sir.
Any fertilizers?
Unless we need the grass to grow, I don't expect we just normal seeding / hydro seeding. And then outside the fence line, where there's a little bit of area between the fence, that would just be left. It just gets cleared to the line and
So
then left
no,
to grow.
no fertilizers or
No
no Let me
pesticides.
put it
No
this way, no
herbicides.
chemical application.
Correct. Water to wash the panels, mowing to keep the grass down.
Okay.
And I got a few more and they're going through my
Yeah,
head.
go ahead.
How high is the fence?
6.5.
6.5 feet, okay.
6 feet with a gap at the bottom. 6
And,
inches for the critters.
Archaeologically, has anybody looked at this area for archaeological things? Because there's a Wallen Pond Estates, which was written back in the 1800s. and it discusses this whole area. And there's a lot of different, possible artifacts and things that could be in this area. I don't know, but, they give you a topographical map in that book, and it shows you a lot of this stuff.
We'll be doing that as part of the NIPD's permit review.
So you have an archaeological person comes in, checks it all out?
Yeah,
Does this trigger a MIPO review?
no, it doesn't.
And one last comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Every project not every project, but quite a few of the projects that the planning board has approved on the first phase, it seems like they always have a washout. The high school had one, the middle school when it was built had one, the one down in Davis Street, actually Northeast Main Street, had a big washout. And that took out quite a bit of the brook, the banking, natural banking in the brook, which was never fixed. And that's Pines Development. And that's a project that you guys approved. But the first thing, you don't think it's gonna happen, you get a heavy rain and that washes it out. And it's been happening over and over again. I don't understand why the town doesn't take care of that.
Thank you, Dennis. All right, take a couple more questions. Yes, in the back?
Ryan Lebeck, Kearney Road. I guess the board did a wonderful job of answering most of my questions, but like Bill said earlier, a 50-foot buffer, this room is 30 feet long. So a 50-foot buffer, I don't know if it's possible, but if this is gonna happen, I would like the board to increase that buffer to more, 100 feet or more. 50 feet, the length of this room when the trees come off, everybody's looking at panels right there. And that's my biggest concern, other than the ones that were already addressed.
All right, I'll take one more, and then we're gonna continue the public hearing. So we'll have an opportunity, if we don't hear from you tonight, to hear you in the next meeting. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Kevin Trider, 291 Long Lake Road. The lithium battery packs, fairly familiar with those. When you go on battery power, they usually generate a lot of heat. So you have fans that would come on and dissipate that heat. Is that gonna create noise at night at 8 o'clock at night? All of a sudden you're gonna have
Similar amounts of noise as the inverter. I'm sorry, I jumped in without.
Go ahead.
Similar amounts of noise as the inverters, but that's why we put them way in the middle of the site. The temperature controls on those batteries are pretty strict to keep them in warranty. So I would say in the winter, yes, they'll heat themselves up, and that's great. In the summer, there'll be fans for cooling, but similar size to the inverters there in the middle. And that's to the wall on the lake side. I mean, better, I would say at least 1,000 feet to the nearest house. And then a little bit more as the road falls away.
In the summer, the leaves are on, you deafen the sound a little bit more. In the winter, when the leaves are down, it's cooled naturally.
A little bit, yes, sir.
So when's our next meeting? Oh, go ahead.
Before that,
Yep.
can I ask a question? So along those lines, too, the DEP has specific regulations governing what's acceptable for noise increases.
Right.
So I think it would be appropriate to give us your idea as to how many decibels the proposed facility will increase the level versus the existing level of the background noise, and basically have someone qualified to do so indicate whether or not we'll be above or below that DEP threshold.
So I can tell you, we just did this on another project that was not horribly. It's one big array. It was 15 acres instead of 28. TRC will jump right on that with the noise study, and we'll bring it to you next time.
Great.
And the answer was negligible. We doubled the stuff in the middle.
That's fine, but then we'll
Yeah.
have some documentation.
Yes, sir, you will.
Just bulletproof.
Hey, anything else, Bill?
Nope, that's all. December 11th?
December 11th? Okay.
You still got some people out there.
All right, you have, one more, go ahead,
I
Dennis.
I heard there's a lot of heat that comes off these. I was told that there's a dehydrating factor, so if you got a big bunch of panels like that, you get the sun shining down, this area gets dehydrated. Is that true?
I have never heard of that effect.
Well, I heard that through the grapevine, so I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, December 11th?
December 11th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
There's not a November meeting?
There's no November meeting, no.
There's no.
So
I think it's voting day.
It is.
But,
That
yeah,
makes me
November
sad.
6th. Make a motion to continue the public.
I'll take it.
I'll make a motion to continue the public
7 p.m.?
hearing.
Can I, somebody make a motion?
I'm trying to make a motion for 7 p.m.
To second that? Second. Nick here. Motion been made by Tracy, seconded by Mike. Any further discussion? Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
The process, will you be able to?
It's voting day.
Because we're
We can't
concerned,
have
yeah, the
meeting
sooner
then.
is better with the sooner program. If we get a vote at the next meeting, it take place, is there a document that we prepare then? Or we have to wait till the next meeting to get it?
Ask Bill that question. Because he'll put it together. Draws the documents up, sir.
How long do you want for the meeting? At least an hour.
That's right.
Probably it's 8:30 now.
An hour, yeah.
That's what I'm saying,
At least an hour. I was gonna say even longer, but at least an hour.
All right, let's keep this moving. I don't know why Aaron is standing up right now. Like it became the audience.
Can we shut that?
Yeah, we will. Folks, we're gonna continue our meeting, so if you can either sit down and listen, or thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for your presentation. Did a nice job.
And what do you want to do, shut the window? Yeah.
Probably not, I'm sorry, I forget.
Step outside with you, okay?
I mean, there's Les there, he's got his jacket on.
I'm very cool. When I
got my arms crossed.
Probably be like 5 or 10 hours.
Sure, I'll be.
All the point, he'll be doing it now.
Chat with these guys indefinitely.
All right,
I got this.
next item on our agenda. Bill, what time do you have to leave?
8:36.
Do we have an Nelson's here?
He doesn't.
I don't.
8:36. I thought he had to leave.
He just said he don't.
Okay, we have a couple things for discussion. Request for release of earth removal bond, Pine and Padoyan, 1 Lockheed Dam Road.
Yeah, I still need to confirm that value, so what I would request is that you sign the release that's in your packet and authorize the release pending my confirmation on the value.
Oh, okay.
So moved.
Yeah, he needs a vote.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Mike Z, seconded by Tracy. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Okay.
How you doing, Cliff? All right?
Request to sign covenant Bellow Wood subdivision?
Yeah, that's, they did not have a signed covenant submitted, so they requested to be put on the next agenda.
So we just need to sign it. for
That
the-
is the residential compound on the Uxbridge line on Maple. Off Maple.
Yeah, that's Cosmo.
Yeah,
So that's gonna go down for November's,
Is that in here, Bill, to sign?
That's gonna be on December.
December?
Okay. That's all I have left on the agenda. Anybody,
I'll make a motion.
You wanna do minutes?
well, make a
Are you
motion.
ready for a motion? Are you ready for minutes?
Yeah. Do we have a minute for?
One minute.
These two can be signed though, Bill, right?
What are they?
What do you have,
This
Mike?
one is Worcester Registry of Deeds.
Yes, that can be signed.
Yep. And the other one
Yes.
is,
September
Greenman Pedersen, Inc.
Yeah, that was for Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay, so those two are okay to sign. That's all we have in the sign folder, so. All right.
Okay, meeting minutes, September 25th,
Yes.
page 1. The 10th sentence from the bottom starts off with the word he applicant. I assume that should be the applicant.
Yeah. Good one.
Yeah.
And that's all I found.
Okay. You got a motion?
Sure.
Nobody else has anything on 25th? No. Okay, go ahead, Trace.
Mike
Oh,
is signed.
go ahead, Mike.
I move we approve the meeting minutes as amended for September 25th, 2018.
Second.
Motion made by Mike G, seconded by Tracy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion carried.
Good job.
I don't know. I didn't find anything on this October 9th. Maybe somebody else did.
Good.
Anybody find it? Did you?
No, but in that case, go ahead, Mike.
Good. I move we approve the meeting minutes as written for Tuesday, October 9th.
Made by Mike G, seconded by Aaron. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed,
Abstain.
Motion. One abstention? One abstention from Tracy.
You were there. Yeah, read it first, right?
You guys weren't very productive while I wasn't here, that's for sure.
Drop the ball.
Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Anything on for discussion other than what's on the agenda?
No.
Okay, future agenda items, you have
they?
those. Our next meeting is in December.
See you then.
And anything at, when's town meeting?
13th?
Yep, the 13th, that's the town meeting.
Everybody vote.
That's voting. Voting-
6th.
The 6th, okay, so town meeting's the 13th, I should, all
Everyone comes to town meeting.
right, October, yep.
It's-
All right, motion to adjourn and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries.